Welcome to the JLC podcast, presented by the Jorgensen Learning Center. Change the conversation, change the results. Here's Dr. Ray Jorgensen.
Thank you. So this is an opportunity for some leaders to talk about the impact of a conversational leadership tool called the Ladder of Inference. And it is a way of seeing the distinctions between what I imply when I send words out and what people infer, what they pull in when they actually hear those words and come to some conclusions about what someone said. So if we don't know what the ladder is, it's a very simple methodology that lets us think about decision-making moving forward. By the time we're done, each of us will have a deeper understanding about the ladder of inference and be able to apply it almost immediately. So, Joe, what did you hear me saying? What are you thinking?
Yeah, so I think you're describing, Ray, how it is a tool, how the ladder of inference is a tool that we can use in meetings and discussions and one-on-one discussions to see if what we are trying to communicate is, sent and received appropriately. I think it can also be used by leaders to reflect on what they are thinking and to examine whether or not their thinking has enough data behind it to be actionable as a leader.
Yeah, I thank you, Joe. I believe one of the biggest uses is to slow yourself down as you start to lean into a decision. How do I take a minute to just pause and make sure I have got as much as I can get to make this decision? One of the phrases that I like that I've seen you use, Joe, and I've seen Terry use, and Vince and I used it together one-on-one, is what am I missing? Very often we start to lean into a decision, it starts to feel good, and we go, well, let me just take a breath and make sure that we check to see, am I missing something, some data point that's out there?
Yeah, and if I can add, Ray, I think it also is a way to think about difficult conversations. Because frequently the difficult conversations is a result of us applying emotion and meaning to things that we've been thinking about. And so we've created a mental model, a picture of what reality is. And we're making decisions about that reality. And so that leads us to the point of saying, I need to have a conversation with that individual or with that group because I believe, again, that's an interesting word, I believe they are off track. I believe they are not going to the right place. I believe they are not getting the results that we need. And so, and so if you enter the conversation again at that point with that individual or group, you get a lot of defensive responses. Whereas if you think about the ladder and think about how do I move to the bottom of the ladder, then you can meet with a group in a less threatening way or an individual in a less threatening way and say, my observation is that, the performance isn't up to what we need in this organization, or whatever words you want to use around that. But you can invite the other party into the conversation to share their observations and give you the context of what's occurring.
Yeah, it is almost like a springboard. Nicely said, Joe. It's a springboard to deepen the conversation moving forward. Excellent. What are you thinking, Vince?
Well, I'll take what you and Joe both said, and from my perspective, I'll put a different spin on it. One of the things that I think the tool does is very, very helpful is it helps you to understand as a leader that people interpret information, the very same information, differently based upon how we were raised, where we come from, and our exposures, right? And so as a leader, when I look at this information, look at the ladder, I say, hey, I come to the table with an expert bias. I've been in the organization for a period of time. I have some expertise, and I know what needs to be done. So that's what I would define as my expert bias. And sometimes I come with unconscious bias. The ladder helps me and your informational set kind of understand that we interpret information differently. And as I walk down the ladder before I make a decision, for me, it has been very helpful to understand that I need additional inputs from different perspectives and points of view from the leaders around my table who are giving me critical data, critical information to make a final determination. So everything that you both said, but the other element from my perspective is not only just to change the conversation with an individual or with a group, but to understand that people bring different information and different expertise to the table, different perspectives of the same data. And I need to pause so that I can understand that perspective prior to ultimately making a decision, which may have lasting impacts on the organization.
Very often, the decision is your best thinking at the moment. And the more we can go back, I loved your language, back down the ladder to check, what have I missed? Who sees this differently? The second thing that you talked about, which is really critical, is that we tend to screen out data simply based upon our assumptions, our beliefs, our biases, our attitudes. We screen data out. So we never get the same data that another human being has. The more we understand that, the stronger we get in conversation and the stronger our decision-making capabilities become. That was excellent. Thank you so much for that, Vince. Terry, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm thinking, I like the word pause. And I think too often as senior leaders, we have a tendency to go, go, go. Do I have 70% of the information I need so I can make a decision? And perhaps those aren't the right decisions. You are making it based upon the information you have at the time. But I like the idea of a senior leader to have this awareness of the ladder. You know, how did we progress on this ladder? We drew our conclusions and we have an action. Can I stop, reflect back? Do I have enough information? Is there something I'm missing? So that next time you get in that conversation, you'll know where you are on the ladder and make a better decision.
It is so interesting. Yeah, all of you are talking about making better decisions. And I love that you didn't use the language about I made the right decision. Well, it was the best thinking at the time. It was my best decision at the time. And sometimes it just doesn't always work out. I thought that one of the things that might be useful, since we're doing this for another audience, is for me to do a quick picture of the ladder so we can tell a couple of ladder stories. I think the ladder stories, and I have many, many ladder stories since I've been in public, private, military sector. This has given me a chance to learn from myself what it can look like. Colleen, do we have a slide of the ladder?
Yes, we do. I'll go ahead and pull that up. I'll share my screen.
Thank you.
And share. There we go.
Thank you. So as Colleen pulls up this picture of the ladder, I'd like to honor the people that taught it to me. Chris Auguris and Donald Schoen taught me the ladder. And I think it was Joe that actually initiated another little piece. People become defensive. Chris Auguris said, systems have defensive routines. I'm always trying to defend my thinking, always trying to defend my decision-making. And if a decision, especially if a decision didn't go the way that I wanted, it sometimes causes that human being to say, my decision was correct. My decision was right. And the language that we're attempting to use is, this was the best thinking at the time. So let me go through the ladder very quickly, since I know you guys know it. You don't really need me to, but look at the very bottom of the ladder. So that's where the data live. I tend to call it data soup. There's all these data points. Right now in the room that you're sitting in, you have near 750,000 to 1 million inputs surrounding you. That little line on the bottom is called a screen or a filter. The fancy word is reticular activating system. It doesn't let all the data in. On occasion, we don't even notice that we missed something. We simply recognize this is my data. So if I gave all of us the same data set, you would, because of unconscious and subconscious attitudes, beliefs, biases, and assumptions, you'll screen some data out and let only your data in. Well, once my data gets in, I then start to go up the ladder. And I'm like, okay, where have I seen this before? That's what perception is about. If I haven't seen it before, and this is really interesting, we tend to flush it out, wash it out. It just goes away. So once I start to say to myself, where have I seen it before? It drifts away. Next one, interpret. And you already said this. I think you said it, Vince. And whoever said it, it was right on the money. If I interpret the data, I make meaning out of it. And when I make meaning out of it, it becomes mine. Next step is I come to a conclusion and I act. Data, screen, my data. Where have I seen it before? What does it mean to me? Here's my conclusion, and I act. Now, a lot of times, some of my clients have said this to me, my ladder has no rungs. I see something and I automatically run up to a conclusion. This is what I should do. And this is an opportunity to really use this as a disciplined practice moving forward. So data, screen, my data, perception, interpret, conclude, act. I'm going to tell you a ladder story, and I'm going to ask you each to weigh in on that ladder story. A long time ago, I was appointed as a principal of a junior high school. This is before they had middle schools. And my superintendent told me two things. He used to call me boy all the time. Boy, here's what I want you to do. I want you to bend with the wind and control the school. I didn't quite get bend with the wind, but I understood from my own vantage point what control meant. So I wrote all these handbooks for everybody. Handbooks for teachers, handbooks for parents, handbooks for kids, handbooks for custodians. Everybody had a handbook. If you were just wandering around the school, I'd hand you a handbook. So I'm thinking I'm controlling the school. 2 weeks into that school year, after things are up and running, it's a Monday morning, the buses come, everybody's there, right? I wander the campus, make sure everybody's in the boxes, it's nice and quiet, and I'm feeling good. I go back to my office, I sit down, put my feet up on my desk and go, what a good boy am I? What a good morning I'm having. This is great. Out in the hallway, I hear boom, crash, smash. And I'm like, what the hell is that? And I jump up, go out into the hallway. There's a kid at the end of the hallway. He's hitting and punching a water cooler and then swearing at it. And, that's my data. Where have I seen this before? I've seen attitudes and behavior like this before. What does it mean? Nothing good. Interpretation, I should do something about this now. Conclusion, go yell at the kid. And I went down and yelled at him. So I yelled at him for about 30 seconds. The whole time he was holding the water cooler, right? And I knew him. I knew who he was. And I didn't recognize him until I got there and started to yell at him. And at the end, he rips his face up at me and goes, my granddaddy just died. I was missing a little piece of data that brought me to a place of action that if I had that other piece of data, I may have behaved very differently. What are you guys thinking right now? Anybody can go.
Yeah, well, I'll go. As you were talking or telling that story, that's exactly what I was thinking. On the ladder, I think we have to have this awareness going into that situation, right? You were ready to react, and we have to really pause just for a second and say, do I have all the facts and data? Is there something that's missing that would change my behavior, my response to what just happened? And so
that's great.
So that's what comes to mind.
For me too, I had a fellow yesterday, I was working with another company, and when he joined the company, he never noticed how many State Farm agents were out there. But as soon as he joined and became an agent, all of a sudden he saw all the signs. And I reminded him, when you buy a new car and it was a little bit too expensive and you start to drive it, you see other cars just like yours. It's almost like you start to relax. That's all ladder stuff, because I come to a conclusion, then I look for supporting evidence that I made a good decision. That's really good, Terry. Thank you. More. What are you guys thinking?
As I listened to the story, it brought to mind that not only did you come to conclusions based off what you saw, but in your leadership position, I am certain that people fed you information over time about, the atmosphere in the school, or maybe particular students, because people have drawn conclusions. And so you have to be very careful when your subordinate leaders who are well-intentioned, they want to feed you information to influence your thought processes and your decisions. And so you had to take a moment of pause. And that is just something, as you talked, it reminded me of decisions that I had to make every day with people who work for me. I was at risk for drawing conclusions based off information I received from others around me. And I always had to make sure that I took a moment of pause before I reacted. So that's what came to mind as you shared your story from my perspective.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say, Vince, and that's nice. So people will come to you and do their best to influence your thinking because they want you to make a decision, sometimes in a certain way that they think is the right way to go. And as they do that, they present you with their ladder. And their ladder, then it feels like they're litigating a case. They're telling you why they're correct. And the work of leadership is to breathe into that and say, first, acknowledge the human being, respond respectfully, and then query. Let's see if I can't bring them back down the ladder. Because what I notice is people sometimes the ladders are just fighting. And I'm trying to get them to stop boxing with each other and help one another go back down the ladder. That was really excellent. Thank you. Joe, what are you thinking about this part?
Yeah, so the thing that strikes me is the role of emotion in us concluding and believing things. And Ray, the other day you sent me the Lou Tice video on this, which I found pretty instructive. Which in that little video, Lou talks about the fact that we have whatever the number is, 50, 60, 70,000 thoughts a day. But those thoughts don't just disappear into the ether. Those thoughts, coalesce over time into beliefs. And maybe the beliefs are minor, because we all believe lots of different things. But when you begin to subscribe emotions to those beliefs, now that moves you more into the realm of action. So I think in the story you just told about the child in the water cooler, again, your initial emotional assignment there is this is vandalism. This is just violence. This is one kind of actions. And when you understand the context, then you understand that there's an emotional component driving the other individual in a pretty significant way. I also think I like looking at the ladder. I think in very I find it personally revealing to look at the ladder in kind of normal everyday situations. So if you're driving down the street and a car pulls out in front of you, you go right up the ladder. You take in the data, you see what's happening, you see it's a threat, you put on the brakes and stop. I think then you can also move it into a professional setting. So if you're a clinician and you see that a patient is about to be transfused with the wrong blood type, you move right up that ladder to say stop. I mean, if you see it in someone and no one else does, for example, and so I think if you back up a moment, you can. And as leaders, we've all experienced again the passion and the emotion of doing the right thing for the command, and that many times it's helpful to pull back on that emotional component, throttle back on it until you understand more about what's going on in any situation.
That's great, Joe. The three of you have played incredible roles, leadership roles in the military. I'd like you, Terry, Vince, why don't you react to what Joe just said about seeing something and doing something? And he added another piece. There's an emotional component. And the more vivid the picture, the more the emotional component. So who'd like to go? Terry, Vince?
Yeah, so I'll go first. What I was thinking while Joe was talking was I had a situation similar to that. We were at a big MHS meeting, lots of discussion of the way forward. We had a leader that we had designated as the person to go to that meeting and to participate and then come away with some conclusions for us. And I had an opportunity to then go to the meeting at the same time that person was there, and went and sat down, started watching the room, and then watching this person who was our rep work through it, or listening. And what I noticed was that person was texting and had their head down. I didn't see much engagement with the rest of the crowd or with the members that were around the table. So I got to drawing conclusions, not participating, doesn't know what's going on. And so I felt afterwards, sort of thinking about that meeting, was there something I didn't understand was going on, right? And I should have talked to that person afterwards to get a better understanding of that. But that has always bothered me, that I did not come back and engage, see if there was something along that ladder that was impacting what was going on. And it probably was my behavior or my biases of how I thought that person should be, performing in that situation.
Yeah. Excellent.
So I would have something to add there, Ray. So I had a very similar experience one time in a training event where, in fact, we were talking about the conversation and guidelines, and we were working through some issues and just introducing concepts to people. And I had a new employee who was sitting right in front of me, and she'd only been on the job a few days, very enthusiastic. But the whole time I'm talking, she's sitting on her phone and she's texting like crazy. Okay. And of course, I didn't consider that appropriate and was put off by it. But I figured, okay, she's new, and obviously, you don't want to call anybody out in a public meeting like that. So, but I was really kind of putting a big marker down to say, okay, I got to come back to this individual and have a conversation here about what's going on and what's appropriate and what's not. So after I finished talking, we had a break, and she came up to me immediately on the break and said, I just want you to know that I've never had any of this kind of training or discussion, and I really think this is wonderful, and I'm really getting tremendous benefit out of it. And I wanted you to know that what I'm doing is I'm making notes on my phone, and I'm taking down, virtually everything you say. So of course, I felt like a heel. But it was another good example of what Terry was talking about.
No, that's really, really good. Vince, what are you thinking about this?
So everything that my colleague said was spot on. I just, from my perspective, I'll give you a different example of where I put this into place. So, you have different personalities around your leadership table that are influencing the decisions that you make. And I had taken another tool, a leadership tool called a predictive index several years ago, because I wanted to better understand my behavior and how I react to things. And so I had an understanding that I have a propensity to make quick decisions and to take shortcuts. But I was also very aware, as a result of that assessment, that I needed to slow down. And so I was making determinations when I left the building, who was I going to put in charge in my stead to make key decisions for me in my absence. And I was faced with an example where my number two was going to be traveling back to the continental United States. We were living abroad, and I wanted to leave at the same time. And that's just a rare when both your key leaders are gone. And I had to decide, who am I going to leave in charge while I'm out of country? I certainly had some go-getters and people who thought the way that I thought. They made decisions that were very familiar to me. But fortunately for me, I'd exercise this same tool, this predictive index tool, to my entire leadership team. And it gave me key data because it told me who my introverts were, who are my thinkers, the people who make careful and methodical decisions. And so I made a decision to leave one of my introverts, someone who thought about taking action steps a little differently than me. And it turned out to be a very good decision, because while I was gone, I had somebody who was very careful, methodical, who called me and gave me ongoing information and detailed updates so that I could help make key decisions even away that turned out to be very, very helpful to the command, given the fact we had a significant crisis in the community while gone. And so my tool and my takeaway was, you have to understand yourself and understand your tendencies and know the balance in your organization is just as helpful if you're unafraid to move into that realm. So someone who had a different ladder than me turned out to be the right person for the job at the time.
It's really, really good. Yeah. I think using the predictive index gives us space to pause and decide who I might put in my place while I'm not here. Excellent, excellent. So stay with this and see if you can come up with another ladder story where you came to a conclusion and you were missing information. I thought Joe's was great, and both of you, Terry, yours was great. Let's get a couple more ladder stories on the table, because that's how people begin to connect to this, is when they see words that produce vivid images that have emotional connection. So you got another ladder story for me where you came to a conclusion and found out later on, wasn't the best one. I was missing some data. I see you wiggling, Terry. You got one?
I was thinking several months ago with the crisis that was looming and under preparedness of readiness, we were trying to get in position where we were going to deploy some what we call expeditionary medical facilities. And we got a warning order, and we got around the big table in the Surgeon General's conference room, and we said, okay, where are we at with this? And one of the individuals stood up and said, I said, how many are we going to deploy? And the individual stood up and says, we don't have any that are capable of deploying. And that very quickly jumped right to a conclusion of, where have you been? What have we been doing? This is our lifeblood. This is a must-do situation. So why aren't we ready, right? And so behavior, emotions, all that came into that, and was really just shocked by it. And then maybe stepping back from that in another day or so, you mean to tell me that we can't put one system together or two systems together out of all of that, of all the systems that we have? Why can't we do that? So there was, more data that needed to come in that situation. So that sort of comes to mind.
That's a good ladder story. The one person said, we can't, we have no way to deploy. And so notice on the other side of the ladder is inquiry. So person advocates a position, we can't deploy anything. The other side is inquiry. Help me understand how you came to that decision. Right. And where might there be more information, more data that would give us a way forward? Otherwise, you're just going to get stuck up in advocacy. And that, I think, is the interesting part of the ladder as we watch our nation today dealing with the pandemic and the social unrest that's out there. People are up their ladders everywhere, making advocate statements. And is anybody saying, wait a minute, help me understand how you got there? I thought either Joe or Vince said this too. Some of the things that happened to us as we grew up, some of the things that happened to us in our life, build those screens, build those pictures. So we only let in data that supports our thinking. Other data that might not support our thinking will not get in. So your story is great, Terry. How do we go to the other side of the ladder and go back down the ladder? That was really good. Joey, what are you and Vince thinking?
Yeah, so I'll tell a story about an experience I had when working in the Navy Secretariat. I think there's a component of military hardware, and as we all know, military hardware is desired to be at a high state of readiness. But there was a particular piece of hardware, type of hardware, very, very common, that was only about half ready at any given point in time, even though we talk a lot about readiness, spend a lot of money on readiness. And so it was kind of interesting that when the Secretary of Defense at the time, Jim Mattis, found out that the readiness on this particular component was at a lower level, he said, unacceptable. I want it at a higher level. And so, it wasn't all the way at the top, but it was pretty close. And since the current levels were in the middle, it set off quite a lot of activity in the department and amongst all the military services to go out and figure out how to improve this, because it didn't come with more money. It wasn't, oh, just go out and figure out how you scale to do more. It was like, take the resources you have and figure out how you reapply them to move up. So that caused people to start asking really hard questions. Since a lot of the readiness of this particular item was on a production line, it caused people to go down and look at how the production lines were being run. And of course, as invariably happens, there were some consultants that came in to help. Their findings and the things they helped wake up the leadership to were things like, if you're going to run a production line, it's important that you kind of have it segmented and that you have people in charge of the segments, and that those segments each have goals and that they drive to those goals in order to make the overall production line produce at a certain level. It also required that the talent be used appropriately. So for example, in this case, very highly trained mechanics were being used as file clerks because somebody thought that was important. So again, it was kind of an interesting thing to see this discussion unfold at the leadership level, because it was sort of like Navy discovers the production line. So who knew if you assigned quotas, to different segments of the line, and who knew if you lined up the logistics in detail that the production line could come out at a higher level? Well, the answer is, of course, Henry Ford more than 100 years ago. But again, it's because we do what we do. And again, no malintention here, but we do what we do, and we think we're doing the best we can until we go out and look in a broader set of data to go, hey, you can really raise your game here. You can have a different outcome. You can have a different perspective.
That's really good. Really good. Vince, why don't you and Terry react to Joe's story? What are you thinking right now?
Oh, you want me to go? So, well, I love the quotas and the goals, and Henry Ford 100 years ago, that just comes to mind. And then, I think C.N.O. Richardson, the other thing that comes to mind, C.N.O. Richardson early on in his stage talked about making predictions. And if you're going to start to go do something, don't just go down the road, which we have a tendency to do. Let's go do that. But you don't know where you want to get to. So how do you evaluate where you are, whether you've made improvements or not? So I'm a big one of setting goals, setting a target. And when you get to the time frame of that target, where are you at? And then learn from it. And I think learning how to do better, all those things come into play with that. So that comes to mind with what he's saying.
Beautiful.
Yeah, from my perspective, I like what he said about, we're under increasing pressure to do more without having additional resources. And so your ability to go in and look at what's critical, what's important, and to reshape your leadership team's management of those finite resources to still achieve mission is critical. And it's just the reality of leadership. It's not going away. It's more and more critical each and every day. And so your ability to take that information and determine how you're going to do that and make it work and get people aligned was critical. So that's what keyed in as he talked. Joe talked about that direction. You as a leader are getting that direction each and every day. Do more with fewer resources with excellence. And your ability to go and influence that decision is absolutely critical.
Yeah. Sometimes people just start to work. They start working. And one of my teachers was a guy that he said that's called making working. They're upset with what's going on. People don't like what's going on. We need to do something about it without looking at an end state, without talking about where we want to get. They begin to work. And very often they're doing the best they can, and it doesn't lead to an actual outcome or accomplishment of a goal. That is really good. Excellent, excellent.
I think
Let me just go ahead.
I would just add one more thing. One of the things I learned from you, and where's the evidence? And so as I would start to work with the senior leaders, is what's our evidence, folks, that we're achieving the desired outcome that we want, right? We were way too often just going down the road, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we really need to get to where is the evidence that we're achieving it, right? What is readiness? What's the evidence that we will be doing readiness in our future state, right?
Yeah.
So everybody could be on the same playing field. So I think that's a key phrase for a senior leader is, where's the evidence?
Yeah. End state and evidence enables the system to behave differently, but still effectively. And if we don't do that, then everybody will start making a case. Well, I did these things, and these are the things I knew to do. They were the right things to do. And the pivot is always to, hey, is that whatever it is you're doing, that thing you're doing, is it producing evidence of success? Or is it just moving us forward down the road? I love that, Terry. That was really good. You were thinking something else, T? Anything to add, Terry?
No, that's good. No, thanks.
That's good. Vince, anything to add on that evidence piece and success?
Well, I will tell you that you said practical application. So I can recall being in an organization where we were required to meet regulatory compliance standards. And while working towards that goal, I was being told each and every day that everything's fine. And I was being presented data that said everything is great. But I knew enough from my organizational experience that things didn't seem to be going quite as well as I was being told. So, I wanted to make a change. I wanted to make a decision, but it was also important to develop my leadership team, the leaders around me. So I had to make a determination of bringing in outside, assistance to assist at evaluating our performance and to see where we were and to validate where that data was to share with the entire team. And so I was able to do that. And only then, after I had that additional assisted information, was I able to make a determination that we were not prepared. And I needed to make organizational changes. And I had to change, some roles and responsibilities within the organization. So, as I listened, that ability to not be afraid to make determinations and decisions is critical as a part of you using this tool. But you want to be smart about it and make sure that you have good information, even if it means reaching out and what I call phoning a friend, asking for assistance.
Yeah, to pull to you more data. Even though the data are interpreted, it's still more information that can bring you forward. I love that. And you actually teed up when August taught us the ladder, he said people produce defensive routines because they don't want to do something stupid. They don't want to behave as though this isn't a good outcome. They don't want to behave in ways that they'd be criticized for. So they end up defending their behavior and defending even a failed evidence state. They don't get to where they want to be or they were expected to get to. They still defend what they did. And the ladder is part of that. I came to the best conclusion I could. This is the right decision. I did these things. Then to Terry's point, did you ever take the time to reflect and find out whether I'm producing evidence of success or am I just keeping myself working going forward? In the part of this that I loved when I learned about it was those defensive routines. So I'm up my ladder and I'm working for you, Vince. And you said, how you doing, Ray? I'm great. I'm doing fine. We've done all this. Here are the things we've done so far. People end up explaining what they have done, not whether or not what they have done has produced evidence of success. So we end up in this kind of wonky conversation about, I'm proud of what you've done. I think what you did was your best. And let's talk about whether what you have done has produced evidence of success, because they keep going up their ladder and advocating, I did my best. The work that I did was my best work. Okay, it was. And I'm not even disagreeing with you. It's the best you could do at that time. Is it producing the evidence of success? What that does for us as leaders is it allows us to broker resources, to help people get more resources so they can better accomplish the expected evidence. So really beautiful, Vince. Joe, how are we doing? Is this conversation, because you're really the one that wanted to tee this up, is this meeting the needs you had about talking about the ladder in a useful, practical way?
I think so, Ray. I do have another aspect I would like to bring in, which is the function of leadership, I think, in understanding these principles and in using them in a seemingly effortless way.
Please do.
So I think, when we there's many things that are complex in the world, and when you, I think, pull them apart and look at it, it can appear to be very clunky. Okay. So if if you need an operation, that's a very complex that's a very complex system of systems that have a thing to do, but they are highly trained and they are highly skilled, and you can go through that process. And again, it looks, relatively simple perhaps from the outside, but there's a lot of things on the inside that are going on. I think it's the function of leadership, a function of leadership. Many times when we talk about these things like the ladder of inference, okay, it begins to really slow down the process, and it causes you to reflect upon what is actually happening. But we're not talking about a 30-minute slowdown or something. We're talking about a leader having the perspective that says, when people come in to see me as a leader, they are going to come in and they are going to talk from the top of their ladders, because that's a very human condition. Mm-hmm. They will have taken in the data, they will have digested it, they will have assigned meanings and emotions to it, and they will have decided in their mind what is the best thing to do. And none of that's bad, but in the course of the conversation, it is my job as the leader to have the conversation about and explore why they are where they are and what is the data behind that, the evidence discussion that we just had. And that done correctly, this is all part and parcel of the normal part of having a discussion that leads to the leader making a decision. And it should be smooth. It should not be clunky. It should be natural, but it should also be very high on content. And so for the group, I would say, how does that land on you?
So can I speak to that next one?
Oh yeah, you got it.
As I listened to Joe talk, it made me think about someone that I admire and respect, and I consider the master of that. And that's the gentleman, my colleague, Terry Moulton. I worked with him for a number of years, and I would sit in his office and watch people call him or walk into his office, and they would present him data. And they would have operated from the very top of their ladder, and they would say, "Sir, I'm ready to make this decision. All you need to do is sign off on this and give me approval." And he was masterful at never discouraging them or tearing them down or kicking them off the top of their ladder. But he would ask very pointed and specific questions. Tell me why. Give me more data. So what is the end conclusion? And so I watched him day in and day out apply this very, very technique and standards. And so people frequently walked out without the piece of paper signed that they initially wanted to have signed. And it's not because they were bad people. It's not because they weren't operating from the top of their ladder. But as a consequence, you understood that when you came to see him, if you presented information, you were likely going to get 2 or 3 questions, and you needed to really be prepared to really speak in more depth and detail. And so I listened to Joe cite that example, and I'm looking at my good mentor and colleague who I watched apply that standard each and every day.
Excellent. How does that land on you, Terry?
Well, my bucket is filled for the day. So, thanks, Vince. He's right. I mean, when people would come in, they're at the top of the ladder, sign here, we're ready to go. And I think I had throughout my career would just ask questions. And the part of that was to get a gauge of the confidence level and how they were doing, right? If they could answer 2 or 3 questions and they were confident in their answers and there was no ho-hum about it, then I felt better about moving forward. But if they came in and they, the very basic questions, they just didn't have a clue, then you knew that they didn't put the effort into whatever particular decision we were trying to get to. Because there's always what other alternatives did you look at, right? Why is this one better than the other? All those things are very important. And if they didn't have an idea of what these other things were, then they did not put the effort into it.
Thank you very much, Terry. Joe, did that satisfy that section?
Yes, I think so.
So for me, there's even one more piece on the ladder that you guys just laid on the table, the 3 of you. If I like Vince, but I don't like Terry, I will hear Vince differently than I hear Terry. Now, I may have developed an attitude towards Terry years ago from something that I saw him do that bugged me or bothered me, and I built a subconscious mental model about the man. Vince, on the other hand, I've seen him work in similar situations, and I built a positive mental model about Vince. If the person I have a positive mental model about tells me something, I go right up my ladder with him. Terry, who I kind of discounted at some point, tells me something different or even similar. I might nod and smile, but I won't even bring the data into the ladder. It is really important to be very personally reflective about watching my own mental models about the people that give me information. Because we all have had folks work for us that we worried about, or worried about their competency, worried about their effectiveness. And if they begin to give us their ladder story about what we need to do moving forward, we almost, and this is the part that I find so fascinating, unconsciously will dismiss that information from that person we don't particularly care for in leadership. So this ladder work is really about understanding that screen, because what comes in, if I admire that person, I listen to what they say. If I have a less than desirable mental model about that person, they might say the same things. I don't let it in. I don't let it in, and it doesn't resonate with me in the same way. So my conclusions become less powerful moving forward. What are you thinking right now?
Yeah, so I'm thinking, Ray, about, again, some of the Lou Tice stuff again, where he says some very powerful things that I've heard in other places, but he captured them really nicely to say that once you give sanction to a thought in your head, your subconscious does not argue. It accepts. So, you decide that, okay, I can never be a fireman. Your subconscious doesn't come back to say, no, you really can be a fireman. You're strong enough and you're agile enough and or whatever the qualifications are. But once you make that decision about yourself, your subconscious is not going to argue. And so then your subconscious is going to guide you in your interactions with those individuals. And so I think this is perhaps the most difficult part for me, is that when subconsciously, when you've made those decisions, then you have to make very conscious decisions to undo that thinking, right?
So beautiful. It's beautiful. See, there's a piece that says, I go up my ladder in my conscious mind. So if I said, so Terry, can you sing really well?
A little Elvis.
I can just do Elvis. That's good enough. So he goes up his ladder and he says, I can do Elvis. And then if somebody else says to him, sing like Paul McCartney, he goes, no, I can't do it. And what happens, see, is we confirm the subconscious belief, I can only sing this way. I cannot be a fireman. I cannot hit the golf ball. Whatever we say to ourselves, and he says this about his grandchildren, and I've said it for my whole life with my grandchildren, watch your self-talk. Because as you make a confirmation of your self-talk, that becomes a reality for you. It's hard to get around it. Very hard to get around it. And the more vivid it is, the more emotion it has, and the confirmation happens more quickly and more profoundly. So right now, I'd like you just to think, what is something that I know I can or can't do very well?
Sing like Paul McCartney.
Yes.
Right. Very good. So I know I can't dance like Sammy Davis. Well, I've never tried, right? But I don't believe I can. Therefore, I can't. So, Terry's played golf with me, and he knows how awful I am at golf at the moment. I'll get better someday. But I play with guys that on certain holes, they take out a bad ball. And they say, this hole's my water hole. I said, what do you mean? Oh, I always hit it in the water here. Oh, you always hit it? Really? Always? I always hit it in the water here. This is what right? They tee the ball up and whack it right in the water. So they confirmed the fact that they did the most reasonable thing, and that's bring out a bad ball so I can hit it. So this is in everything that is going on all the time. And our subconscious, when it confirms a thought, it stays with us as a reality. Vince, what's something you can and can't do?
Well, I'm an outdoorsman, so I ride motorcycles fairly well, and that's a hobby that I do. And golf was a good example of something that I've always wanted to do better at, and I play at it, but I don't play well enough to go out and confidently play with others around me, because I just believe that my play is that much worse than those around me. So I tend not to do that. It's something I would enjoy doing. So I wish that was something I was able to have more confidence and do better.
Oh, Vince, I love that. See, there's a piece here that, for example, if there's somebody in your command that you really don't like talking to, right? And your subconscious knows this person's I don't like this guy. I don't like this gal, right? When you see them coming down the hallway, you go to the bathroom, or you go the other way, or you just go, hey, I got something to do. I can't talk to you right now. It's almost as though our subconscious is defining how we will behave in the real world all the time. So I just love that. And how do we recognize that's the reflection piece? I must reflect on my own mental models so I can determine what they're doing to me. The ladder of inference is all about mental models, because I could go up it very quickly. And if I hear somebody saying something that I agree with, it's bang. Okay, you got it. You're right. Terry, what, you going to say something?
No, what come to mind as you were talking was the self-talk, right? What the mind can believe it can achieve. And so we ought to stay in that frame. The other one is thinking, right? And so if you're starting to think those negative thoughts, you need to have an awareness as a senior leader of, hey, that's thinking. And there's no place for that. Let's get back over into that positive position and believe in a positive way. And then the other thing that came to mind was as I spoke with junior officers, I would talk about autograph your work with excellence, right? Whether it's your piece of paper that you're signing that you're going to give to the boss, or you're putting his signature block, his or her signature block down there, how you prepare that is a reflection of you. And that sets that model of you with your senior leadership. So as a young officer or young leader, the way you present it, autograph your work with excellence, whether it's a PowerPoint presentation or a piece of paper. Always autograph your work with excellence, and then that sets your reputation for the future.
Yeah, that's really good.
So I would add that I think, for leaders, particularly senior leaders, the conversation we're having is hopefully helpful to some of them in thinking about where they can lead their organizations. In some of the work I did in the Navy Secretariat, I was fascinated by how, the warfighters in the line had a very aggressive attitude about, as they should, about, we can figure any situation out, put us in the hard place, we'll do the right thing. and we'll improvise, we'll use what we have, we'll get the job done, we'll come back with mission accomplished. Okay, so your mission now is to move off of this financial system onto another financial system and do it in this time frame. Oh no, I'm completely defeated by that. There's no way I can possibly do that. And then when you counter with, well, look, if an adversary had compromised your financial system right now, today, before you went home today, you would have figured out an alternative method to get your work done. How to, and so I think it's part of the job is to make that realization in the organization that there are possibilities here that they don't routinely think about.
And they can't, because it's not in their current ladder. So a lot of what you guys do for people when you lead them is help them get beyond the conclusions that they've come to, beyond the top of the ladder, and help them go back down it and look for more data and more possibility. Final thoughts before we do a checkout.
I think that if you're going to move into this space or to this realm, hopefully you have been preparing for some time in adding to your collection of knowledge, your body of knowledge and influence, so that once you become a senior leader, the concepts of the ladder of inferences and other assessments and tools should not be beyond your comprehension. These should be things that you should put in your wheelhouse to help refine your leadership qualities and skills, as opposed to identifying them. If you're identifying them now, you've probably missed something along the way, and perhaps this is not the domain and the space for you. But my thoughts are, as a senior leader, I think this is a wonderful tool, an excellent tool, and it gives you just something in your toolkit to reach into, to further develop, and to ensure that you take care of your people, because we're in the people business at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's really nice, Vince. I think you probably already know this. Some of the folks in your organization are reaching out to us about how to hold conversations about the social unrest going on in the country right now, because the command is a microcosm of the community at large, and certainly the country. And the more we explain the distinction between facilitation, helping a conversation get strong, as opposed to making a point so I'm right, there is a real interesting concern about how do we have conversations where I really want to learn. I want to learn. I don't just want to litigate my position and make the boss do what I want and make this person understand my position, get this particular thing enacted in my community. How do we actually engage in a way that a broader group of people can understand the perspectives that are out there? And I think that's unfolding right now everywhere. And never did I think that the work that I've been developing in my own self, building my own capability to work in this space, that it would be as useful as it seems to be now. So that's really and the ladder is one of my key components. Where am I on the ladder? Where am I not listening to someone that I have unconsciously screened out? Where have I unconsciously screened out my ability to hear varying points of view that don't match mine? So this work is it's a privilege to do the work. And I would say to each of you, including you, Colleen, and I love the fact that you were on the call with us. I admire each of you for the way you discipline yourselves to think about what issues, problems, crises, opportunities that we're facing. I admire you all. So with that stated, let's do a quick checkout. Learning and change are the same thing. I know everybody wants to act like they're different. They're not. And you engaged in this conversation beautifully today. So I'd like to get from each of you, here is a learning. Here's something for me today that actually shifts the way I respond to the world in general, but even specifically. Here is something I got from the conversation today that was really useful, something I can apply. Again, learning and change, similar. So tell us something that you really kind of resonated with you today. And then at the end, say, I'm out, and that's our checkout process. Colleen, are you willing to play on this one? Why don't you give us one that you took? What is a learning for you today watching these interactions?
I think probably something that really resonated in all the different examples. Joe mentioned something about, it being clunky at first. And then in an excellent story that Vince shared was how Terry moved through that and really embraced this concept, and probably subconsciously didn't even know he was really tapping into this knowledge about the ladder, but he was applying it in daily conversations to ensure he had a deeper understanding and wasn't just accepting one person's perspective and someone advocating a position, but he was subconsciously and probably consciously asking quality questions to learn more to ensure he had enough data to make an informed decision. So I think the biggest part for me in each one of these gentlemen hit the same kind of concept is it's about the self-awareness piece. How can I as a leader remember the concept of the ladder and apply it in a practical way? And they gave great examples of what that looks like, but it begins with self-awareness and remembering. So I pause and ask those key critical questions so I can learn more. And I'm out.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Who'd like to go next?
And mine is short. I'm going to say ditto to what Colleen said. As I listened, what was reflected for me is we talked about things that were part of routine daily practices and things that we talked about at leadership conferences with the bosses and things that we were applying. What I did not do was to step back and go, this is a very good example of the ladder of inference. This is a very good example of a predictive index scenario. And so I think for me as a senior leader, what it helps me to do is to go back and to periodically check in with the theory that I am also working to apply to enhance my ability to continue to do this work and to lead by example and lead well. So I think that was the only thing I would add in addition to what Colleen has said, and I'm out.
That's really good, Vince. Thank you so much. Empathy, trust, and perspective, kind of the leadership needs to move forward. That was really well stated. Thank you. Who'd like to go?
Yeah, so I'll go. Yeah, I think what resonated with me, and I agree with Colleen and Vince, but the key word I would probably say is practice. And this is a practice, right? Understanding where you are, having on the ladder, and that having that awareness in the conversation of what is going on with that ladder takes practice. So my big takeaway is pay attention, have that self-awareness. I like the predictive index, understanding yourself and understanding others, and then helping them do the same thing. All of that has been good, but I think practice these tools are very valuable for senior leaders. And I'm out.
That's nice. I had a fellow I worked with in none of the states you're in. He was one of the state secretaries, and we shared the ladder with his team, et cetera, et cetera. So they all knew it, and he shifted his language in meetings, his C-level meetings, board of director meetings, to sounded like this: I'm on the top of my ladder, and I'd like somebody to drag me off it. But I need some help. I'm convinced I'm right. I need your help. And he used it as a way of creating that thing we talk about at JLC all the time: safely dangerous space. I need not just safe space, we can all say this safe space. The question is, do you have a space open that's actually dangerous? I can talk about dangerous things. I can talk about things that upset me. Safely dangerous space. And you made me think about that, Terry. That was really great. Thank you. Joe, how about you?
So the thing that perhaps we didn't talk obviously about, but I think much of the conversation pointed towards, is really change and change management, and using the ladder of inference to help you as a leader understand how to affect change. Because the ultimately change in an organization fails unless it happens one person at a time, because people have to behave differently. They have to do something differently. They have to act differently in order to step off in a different direction. And so I think the use of the ladder, I've been thinking a lot about this in the role of change management, because when you make a decision and the intention is to send the organization in a different direction, again, you have to have the reflection that we've talked about today about why are we making this decision. Then I think you also have to work through the change management aspects of that, of how are we going to train, how are we going to set expectations, how are we going to communicate, how are we as an organization going to talk about this so that the change takes and is effective. And I think this is much the struggle of Navy medicine right now around readiness and many other issues that tie back to readiness.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm out.
So Joe brought up Lou Tice before, and what I gave you when I did the ladder with you today, and the picture of the ladder is actually his picture of the ladder. Lou Tice was a mentor, not a friend. I knew him, he knew me, and he helped me in so many ways increase my capacity and capability as a leader. And one of the things Joe said I'm going to respond to from Lou's words: all deep and long-lasting change starts on the inside and works its way out, one person at a time. All deep and long-lasting change starts on the inside and works its way out. And he provided for me the most incredible opportunity to reflect on my leadership and how I was interacting with people. And so what you see in JLC today probably had a lot of its foundation with Lou Tice. And if you haven't looked at his stuff, I would. He's passed now. I still get people that were in his organization. I still get their daily blogs or weekly blogs, whatever it is. But it does help me remind myself that my self-talk builds an incredibly powerful mental model about the world. And without trying, I react in accordance to that mental model. The ladder is the beginning of the mental model. You guys have been magnificent. So before you go, I'd like you just to introduce yourselves real quick, less than 30 seconds. Who are we talking with here today? So Joe, who are you?
I'm Joe Marshall. I spent 25 years in uniform in the Navy and had command of a ship, and then went on and worked for about 20 years as a senior executive in the government in both the civilian and the DoD sector. Thank you.
Thank you. Vince, who are you?
So I'm Vince Starks. I spent 30 years in the Navy. I had the command of hospitals in Navy medicine, and I spent my last 2 years in the organization working at headquarters, looking at systems, governance, and transformation of healthcare delivery systems from the Navy, the Army, and Air Force over to the Defense Health Agency. And I'm now retired and working in the community and looking for the next chapter.
Thank you so much. Terry, who are you?
Yeah, my name's Terry Moulton. I'm a retired two-star medical service corps officer with 30 plus years in the Navy. Commanded a hospital overseas, a medical center, and a regional command, and ended my career as the Deputy Surgeon General of the Navy.
That's super. Thank you. Colleen, who are you?
Colleen Sullivan. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the Jorgensen Learning Center. Had the absolute pleasure of working with Ray for, I think it's going on almost 12 years now. And I've also had the immense pleasure of working with each one of these senior leaders in my tenure working with the Jorgensen Learning Center.
Excellent. And my name is Ray Jorgensen, and I guess I am the founder of JLC. But certainly the thing that we have attempted to bring to the world is the practical application of conversational leadership and the artifacts of conversational leadership, the use of those disciplines, would represent what is necessary to produce a learning organization. So certainly in the context of military medicine and the Secretary of the Navy, certainly past DOD Secretary Jim Mattis, he kept talking about learning organizations. When you see the practices, they are artifacts of a learning organization under the heading of conversational leadership. For those of you listening, thank you so much for listening in, and we look forward to hearing from you again. You can find us at gojlc.com. Good day. Thank you.
The Jorgensen Learning Center provides leaders with a practical framework to use conversation as a discipline to create a high-performance environment where people are energized to share, contribute, and succeed together. To learn more, visit gojlc.com.